on G2 in this opening best of one, and to take it away, it's going to be Lemon Kiwi and I Hold Shift.
Let's get it. Woo, that's a podcast right
40
there.
minutes.
Wow, casual.
Let's go.
Let me get some throat coat tea.
We have told you guys everything and anything you need to know. So thanks for tuning into our untitled podcast as we get into sunset between G2 and KC.
Wow.
And maybe I'm just, the C stands for cope for me, because I think KC, it's not unwinnable for me.
Well, let's take a look at the compositions here. Didn't get the full agent select coming through, but we can obviously tally it here. It is still double duelist. Av's still going to be playing on the Phoenix alongside the Yoru, so that is kind of important to note. Where on the other side, you are having Shaq on the Viper. Again, a pick that is not necessarily terrible on this map, but it is different, and Jonah P on Chamber. Okay, so this kind of gives you that intention. We talked about this almost an hour ago. Can you set yourself up to kind of bleed out KC, and already Jonah P kicks us off with first blood down the middle of the map.
Yeah, just the attention of 3 players from G2, all looking at mid. Now that the smoke is gone, you're looking towards Martine to have some presence, and he just gets a shot in the head. So, hey guys, they are all in the middle watching that. Do not cross the road. You will get hit by a car.
Well, opening blood good. 5v3 situation. Spike will have a little bit of freedom to work over towards A elbow, but again, not trying to over-convolute the situation. This is difficult to break through with just a Sova and an Omen. So Getsu just trying to put some noise over towards B. See if they can pull the defense, give some numbers opportunity over on the A site, which, well, they're even getting cold feet about as well. So difficult moments here. 40 seconds to play for KC, trying to find an engagement.
Now you got this Sova, you got Sadak looking at
Here.
mid again, because now just droning up, you are going to spot that chamber from Jonah P, but that lurk being activated over at A is going to inspire some movement. You also have your trip ready for the flank, so KC just have to set their sights forward. There's not going to be any defense from G2 to hold this back, but there's an exchange. Jonah with now the 3rd kill this round.
Yeah, that's all you need, is you just watch over this cross. Left. You know that the play is now moving over towards A, and G2 in normal G2 form, even in a 5v2, are just going to set themselves up to play with the numbers, then play just a very simple retake here. Sadak, an opportunity to try to play a little bit scaled forward towards the A site. Splitting the difference here. Sadak will find first blood. There's the isolation. And yep, Sadak will surely fall here in a moment as the last 3 members for G2 are making their way around the back. And it will be Trent with the final shots to comfortably win the pistol.
Yeah, it all started with KC just finding some mid presence. Martine kind of getting a sense of where this defense is set up, and just losing Martine, just your main guy. So early for KC really hurt their chances. At least they finally did get towards a site. I believe they planned it. It's just G2 having more members at the end, especially that haunt from Trent, identifying where Sadak was. You kind of had the ball rolling for G2 early.
Yeah, G2 doesn't care about playing retake. There's no ego about them giving away a plant and just playing their numbers correctly. And that's another important figure about what we're looking at with Shaq in the lists. Like, you're just not going to be using him as a way to, oh, we need him to get a first blood. We need him to play forward. Like, we can just play off the utility, bleed out KC, get a feel, and if we can get the opening picks and then turn that into numbers, we'll just use our numbers and just keep it very, very simple. Paranoia going to cut across over the front side at A, though, as KC will find entry over towards elbow. One-way smoke for Valen to try to isolate, and that will be enough for KC to grab the orb and then figure out if they want to actually commit to this or not.
Now running the double duelist instead of the solo Phoenix. I'm excited to see how KC can find different angles, being able to have Martine play solo like he did in the pistol. But the Outlaw from Jonah P will be just chilling over at B, and very deep B, so you're very certain nothing's happening at B this early. That's why G2 are taking as much real estate over at A, but there's going to be some noise that Jonah P is going to spot. He's able to teleport out in time. Good information, too, being able to activate that Viper wall to slow things down for KC.
Yeah, KC, again, though, just getting control of B main, going to grab the orb, and then get out of here. I mean, again, talking about, like, how do you figure on winning this round, probability percentages are low, but try to maximize where you can. So grabbing both the orbs is big, and now they're going to be right back over with 35 seconds over towards the weaker of the sites. Fallon will be by himself, at least momentarily, but he is playing backside in the corner of the site with a stinger. So again, he's just looking for first contact, hold the ground as long as he possibly can, and wait for help to start to arrive. Giacomo, the closest one there, playing off the one-way. And here we go, execute going to be coming the next couple of seconds.
Yeah, and Valen can play safe, especially with the stinger. You have a paranoia, so as soon as KC emerge, 12 seconds, it has to be here and now. The pressure onto Valen will at least bring down one with them. Good chance for KC as they pick up that stinger left by Valen, that IGL from G2, and around the corner, Trent is going to try and activate before the rest of the team are in position.
No utility.
Is trying to pressure them back and not let the entry be as easy. And now spotting that Trent is in a one-and-done position. KC worked together to take him down.
Yeah, that was just not a good spot for Trent to be in. No utility remaining, so he's just stuck in a corner. Good isolation on it. And now it's time for the Shack attack. Able to find the first cleanly. A little bit of a lineup, almost able to find it all. But the Thrifty does come through for KC. Swing the eco around.
That was just really great teamwork out of KC to just not kind of lay back and let G2 re-entry, but as soon as they identified where Trent was, he was isolated. KC played off that information. So already playing with confidence despite playing against an anti-eco says a lot to K-Corp's mental coming into this one map.
And the other side of it too, and just to kind of counteract my own point here, not to flip-flop, but if G2 are going to continue to play for retake, if KC can get a feel for that and say, we're going to get a lot of free entry towards these choke points at A, let's keep putting the pressure on G2 to make a commitment. Are they going to try to have to set up any sort of trap play with this chamber? Or are we going to get some free ground and really put the pressure on G2 having to be perfect in retake situations? So we'll kind of come to see what those patterns exist as we move into KC largely on a full purchase after winning the anti-eco round. And they also collect first blood, another orb for Martine getting closer to Dimensional Drift. And with numbers advantage, it looks like KC's not going to waste their time to feel out the B site.
Giacomo has some nades, has a satchel. You already know that KC are in B main, but kind of wants to only show himself when G2 are ready to set up for trades. So it will be Martine flashing in, ready for the double swing out of G2, trying to put as much damage as possible, but the rifles are simply going to be too strong, and this is looking like a flawless for KC, actually.
Yeah, see if Valen can make it a little bit more punishing, but going into what was essentially a couple of SMGs at best with pistol upgrades. Again, expectations start to move over towards KC's direction. Valen going to have to make a decision here. Does hit a headshot, but it's a stinger at range. That's Marshmallow. And it will be a team ace for KC, up now 2-1. But here we go. We're going to get an early gun round into round number 4. Plus, you have the tour de force for Jonah P. Early earned. Sadak on the other side does it the Hunter's Fury. So we're going to get a really good intention here in terms of, does KC try to hit and hit hard, or will they continue to play with this more labored approach, playing for orbs and trying to stretch this G2 defense out a little bit further?
It is going to change your approach now for KC, now that G2 do have a buy-up, so you may need to take some time to drone up, check these corners, and really get a lot of usage out of this curveball from Aves, or usually Martine is the one flashing up first, but G2 can insert Jonah P, and he just gets inserted 6 feet underground. So great chance for KC with that first blood.
And that's a Hunter's Fury to isolate the angle, and then finished off as tour de force does not connect. Jogma with one trade, but feels a little bit minimal, as he has to move quickly on the other side. Aldro makes his way into A, looking for Valen behind the boxes once again. Paranoid to give himself a little bit of space. Now you've got the paint shells to once again create a bit more of a buffer, but Giacomo is completely stuck, struggling to get the utility into play, and it once again comes down to the Love Shack for a 1v3.
Not the Love Shack. I love it though, but yeah, there's only so much you can do. Giacomo was caught completely surrounded, and KC, it went from a thrifty on the anti-eco, or going up against the anti-eco, to a flawless, to now building up these rounds, and using that Hunter's Fury, of course, helped a lot. This is KC building momentum against G2 that now have to fall behind and save.
Yeah, and early on, it's tough to get a full evaluation on what G2 is going to have to try to change and mold and adapt, but there is a level, again, of KC finding a lot of vacancy at the very beginning when the barriers drop. We're not seeing any sort of trap play. It's just hard-scoped angles so far from Jonah P, whether that be with the Headhunter or the Tour de Force in that most recent round. But you throw the early firewall, you follow up with a haunt or something of the nature to try to feel out what is going to be the defensive setup. And once again, it's just another isolated first blood, this time through the middle of the map.
Now, this a lot rides on Shaq with just the share, but maybe he can get his one and done. This is your signature agent. You gotta show when you can, and you already have some delay with the molly at the front door. KC do not care, and just spraying right through the smoke. Flashes are out. That's just kind of the lethality of running the Yoru Phoenix. As soon as you're just flashed up the whole site, and you really don't want to play in it.
Yeah, it's just another element too, where it's like, we're seeing Abs right now drop the early firewall just to push off the opening hard scope angles at A. And that's putting G2 in a bit of discomfort, not really getting forward off the Viper's wall at B main. So again, it's just KC do have an early edge of just trying to bully out what G2 want to do. But as we get into round 6, this will be the last chance, I think, for G2 to try to play off of what their playbook was at the very beginning, which has been Jonah P taking an early angle. It worked out of the pistol, has not worked out since that point. How do you try to get a little bit more forward pressure and be a little bit more contest heavy in these first blood battles that, honestly, for KC have just been flat out 1v1s that they've come out on top of?
I'm looking at this run it back from Aves and kind of how much you want to simplify your push. And do they just want to hard commit off the run it back or kind of use it as a fake where they can try and pull a lot of G2's attention towards one side of the map and actually hit the other? We haven't seen too many mind games out of KC. It's been a lot of just the one side, maybe a bit of exploration down mid, which didn't really work out with how much G2 were watching that. So KC are really trying to simplify things.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's just a level of don't fix what's not broken. I mean, if you know for a fact the firewall is going to give you the early angle at A, you know you're just going to be trading smokes over towards B, take the space that you're given, which has to this point been that entry point at A over towards elbow, and make G2 have to defend the site if they choose to from inside the site, or have to play a retake where up until the first round, it has been 5v4s the other direction at least for KC. So an interesting moment here. Early timeout for G2, but with the operator in play, full purchase coming out, this is going to be not last chance saloon for what their defense is, but I think in terms of their opening playbook, you need to show us what exactly is the intention as they, again, just play through mid freely. And this, again, leads you to believe that for KC, it's going to be free at A. You run it back, you get in early, and this should be a very quick post-plant setup for KC.
Just the run it back plus the Yoru clone, like there's just a lot of fakes happening from KC, but now fully committing down to A, immediate spike plant, and Jonah will be on his way. He's kind of more watching the lurk out of mid with the op, but KC are a very proactive team on the post plant, but are not going to try and extend out of the site. Instead, leave the trip, drone up, see if G2 are there, and are just trying to expect what G2 are doing.
You need info here. Because for G2, you're looking at what will likely be Jonah P on a hard scope angle, and then, yeah, it has to be a full flood the other direction. Does this trap wire provide an issue? So far, yes, as Jogabos is getting trapped up and tripped up everywhere, but it still comes down to G2 finding the kills that they need. Elite, the last one left, he's stuck at elbow, and G2 just take the old-fashioned approach. Snowball, get in together, and just work your way through after you block the back of the site. Good retake.
And it's KC kind of getting away from the success that they did in the post plant, where they were, okay, they had info, they extended at the top site and hunted for kills. But now because they huddled up after the smokes, just depending on one ways, G2 had time to kind of develop a plan, see if there was any lurks, no lurks. Everyone from KC is within the site, so G2 just flooded in, and KC couldn't really do anything about it.
No, that's the thing, though. Like, if you're going to use the run it back to get site control, you can only go so far. You can't really get deep into the backside of the defensive angles at A. So you have to essentially either choose to play on site or play an elbow for your post plant. But when G2 outsmoke you, you have to play on site. So again, that's just a little bit of those moments of G2 says, we can outfrag you. Jonah in some trouble, will snap back over into market. Deals with the dart and will set his ground here as the door will keep his aim. Yep, very primed up at mid, but Sadok actually does still try to take the challenge. He gets punished for it. 5v4 early for G2.
There's some mid control for KC and trying to punish that I've identified that Jonah likes to hold that back mid area. Like ever since that 3K from the pistol, KC have been on Jonah watch. How can you get that teleport out of the chamber? And then how can you activate the lurk afterwards? So really being threatening around mid as G2 are trying to play close attention.
Well, keep an eye here on how deep G2 got through A while all that action at mid had happened. Valen had gotten all the way around the back towards the offensive spawn, but awareness is high for KC. They trade off that first blood and find a follow-up. So now the dimensional drift will get earned. That will clear out B main and a large majority of this B site. They get through the Viper's wall for free. Cypher will also reinforce by getting extra information off the neural theft, and this should be just a dissection of the B site and a post plant somewhere near the front.
And you had ears from Aves around mid to either go towards spawn or just kind of join for the market, flood in, and Shaq will be the anchor. He has flash, he does his best to look away, but it's only death that he sees, and Trent is following suit as well. 13 seconds, and KC have this on lock, it seems.
Yeah, really, really good execute there from KC. But Shaq, you thought maybe had done enough, just getting that spam. Elite not able to get into the site through that Viper's wall, but on the site itself, things trend in favor of KC. Trent, first corner, most important one. Not going to have it. Martin just playing the angle, will find the headshot, and it'll be a 5-2 start here for KC. Eco will be okay for G2 moving forward, but off the timeout, you're hoping for more than that.
G2 really, or just KC really tried to slow it down and just kind of identify where the G2 setup was, eventually flooding in. And KC, when they use all those flashes early, you're not going to have much to hold back, but I think just being able to catch people who were anchoring in, like Shaq, with those flashes and dwindling the G2 numbers down enough with those flashes, I think was huge for KC. And even post timeout from G2, they're able to scratch the surface of KC, but now we can see Aves try to activate around mid, but G2 haven't been aggressive around that area.
Yeah, but an important round here, you've got the Viper's Pit, you've got the Showstopper, so what do you want to do with it? Do you want to continue to display for retake? And, well, having a first blood, especially with the control over towards B main, it'll likely be that way. Good early snake bite, actually put some significant pressure on Aves here, but he'll heal up through the firewall. B still looking very problematic, though, for KC, and they're going to back off and likely head over to the direction of Martine, who's working on elbow with a potential 1v1 in front of him with Trent. Big pick.
And now trying to cross over with the spike is definitely Showstopper. The lead is gone. Jogamo, an insane 3K, and also to get the spike down, that has sealed the round.
Yeah, absolutely has. I love the call to pull out the Showstopper there, too, knowing that it's not just going to be one player lurking through mid. You need this round. It's an important one. You get it. You also just do a little bit of dance with that cyber cage that was tossed out by Elite. You saw the pre-aim looking up. Instead, it's out. The wide blast pack for Jogamo allows him to go 1v3, essentially.
Portal closed.
Martine going to try to work his way around the back to see if he can find some punish. No reason to not try to force some repurchases here with the cash that he's got in hand. But likely the chances at winning this round are going to be a little bit low. Shaq will fall. Information now gained for G2 that if he's going to do anything, it will be around back by our spawn, and they're just going to back away and value saving the 3 rifles.
But G2 are, like we said in our podcast earlier, that G2 are very good at coming back from deficits and kind of outthinking their opponent. And we said that it was a big duel of those top IGLs of Sadak versus VALORANT. But so far, KC are riding off the high of just knowing that this is winnable. You have a weaker version of G2. You are able to punish Shaq, who is trying to anchor, trying to play solo. But besides going for one, a lot of the time, if KC can find where Shaq is set up, that will be a really good punish for KC to get an early round advantage.
Small tech pause on stage, but a chance to evaluate here with a couple of rounds to play. I think what's going to be important here in these next 2 rounds for G2 is, first and foremost, do we pop the Viper's Pit in this round to try to make any of the 2 sites a little bit more difficult to hit? Because you do have a Nightfall coming up, which would be obviously a tool that they would like to use for retake. So do you use both upcoming, or do you try to set something up here to have a more tempered round, try to drain some of the eco out of KC, and then follow up with having things like a Tour de Force and a Nightfall as a retake tool, play off of the first blood, which Jonah P has been often trying to do. Whereas on the other side for KC, there's a level of you can slow this round down, try to take some advantage if the Viper's Pit does get pulled of getting orb collection, because then you're close to run it back, you're close to a dimensional drift, which are 2 tools that they're going to want to use a snowball into these executes. So this is going to be one of those chess rounds, I feel like, coming up here next as fist bumps are out, and we should be looking back in here soon.
I think G2 are okay giving a lot of real estate to KC in terms of mid control. Like, G2 are not really even watching it because they know KC are not taking huge risks of going towards the opponent's spawn or activating a lurk that's very, very far away from the rest of the team. And I think Jonah P has really identified that. He's been on lurk watch against KC. KC are playing very much together. So I think if you early pit on one of the sites, that would make a lot of sense. And now it's actually an aggressive swing out of G2 to check out B main, get that info early, but you got to trade it out.
Trade's fine. That's the same status over the top of the B site. But, yep, that's going to call the Viper's Pit to be used, because now you want to try to stack your resources in a different direction. Curveball out. VALORANT in some trouble, has to paranoid to get himself away. Hot Hands doesn't really do too much in terms of damage, and Jojamo, timing here's everything. Only finds 1 for the effort, and now mid-map is a problem, and that means that Shaq is completely out of the picture here, as he was looking to, his teammates could hold down mid, and he could just watch B main, but now he's going to make a decision. Do I hold my Viper's Pit and stay away from the rest of the 2v3, or do I get out of here and help my teammates?
It is kind of awkward to sync with a Phoenix, because as a former Phoenix main, you be team flashing sometimes if you're just a little bit off sync. So trying to play around those corners, curveball in. I like that they're actually trying to push the opponent's spawn or wrap around the backside of A. Use that firewall from the Phoenix to kind of isolate what angle you're looking at, one step at a time. But KC are now going to be able to plant at B, just getting around this pit. But then you won't be able to play from B main unless you deal with Shaq.
Huge. That's a huge pick from Trent, able to find the lead. Nightfall's going to get called. Abs is going to be found on that. They do not get the information, though, on Martin, who is trying to figure out what's happening in the pit, but may not make much of a difference here for a 1v3 situation. He's going to find this elimination quickly. Yep, and then get to work, because everyone is all over this site. He's found himself some real estate to work with. Valen looking for the angle and finds it perfectly. A one-round difference as G2 bring us to a 4-5 count.
I just want to see KC play from main a little bit more, whether it's from the corridor of A, that A hallway, or B main, because they're taking mid control. They were trying to be funny, wrap around the backside of A. Once they got killed, they were like, okay, let's go plan B. So they wrapped through market, then didn't really know the game plan of how to deal with that Viper's pit.
They were trying to isolate the Vipers, is that call. That's the whole idea, is like, let's put some pressure on the site and see if we can force the Viper out. If we can force his attention onto site, then you can lurk through the pit with the shorty. The problem is Trent gets there faster than I think KC are expecting, and that pick from the backside of B is everything for G2, because then Shaq can obviously keep his attention into the corner. You don't have to worry about the number situation as badly with KC not committing to go to A with a 3v2 in front of them. So yeah, that just kind of works out nicely thanks to the commitment and the mid-game calling from G2 to get over to B quickly.
Yeah, it's just like, how do you force out that Viper when they could just play within the pit, play from B main, and just kind of be a looming threat? And Shaq can just kind of minimize those risks, because kind of trying to play solo, he's been punished a lot. So I think that created a problem of, okay, let's wait for this Viper to come out, as you said. And then when they did, it was when the rest of G2 were there. So both these teams are trading blow for blow, and G2 are closing the gap in the score.
No, looking good. And there's a level of KC not necessarily using the space and the real estate given to them at A main anymore. They're trying to find picks through mid, which I can appreciate, because we have seen that Viper's wall through B main try to set up G2 a little bit more aggressively at B main, at least by intention. They haven't really done that as much. A couple of moments where Jonah P has used that angle as his avenue for a first blood. Hasn't really worked out as well as maybe the intention would lead you to believe, but KC are trying to really separate this G2 defense. And for G2, knowing where their vulnerabilities are, they're heavy rotating back to mid to deal with that, and it's worked out nicely for them to get back to this game.
Joke's over. You're dead.
Okay, there's the running back, the clone, just a lot of disruption from KC. So getting into the site hasn't been a problem, and I think G2 just try to play away from those smokes, and okay, well, Jonah P is deadly, and I think KC have to be aware of that.
Well, the thing about this is KC have the advantage on the backside of the site because of this is their one way. So you get the Phoenix back, you now have the ability to set someone up on this trap wire rather than playing on the front side of the site. But G2, once again, same setup, 4-man hit on the retake, all of them coming over towards this back A alley. Now you have a chance for him to try to get to work, but Shaq able to find first blood. Jajamo follows up. Hunter's Fury is desperate in nature, but can it kill the time? And maybe even better, Sadok's able to find two. 1v3 situation, needs to have the ace on top of that, but Shaq is holding for the defuse. Can Sadok find the angle in time? He gets one tag, but the spike gets defused, and there will not be enough time for him to find the consolation ace.
Got that player low so quickly. And then Aves, you heard the satchel from Jogamo to get on top of those boxes. He was kind of waiting for his Cypher Elite to put that cage down, because that's been the game plan from KC. Sit that Phoenix in a cage or in a smoke, flash out, and really surprise and utilize those smokes to your advantage. But KC, before all of that utility was set up, G2 had already pulled the trigger. They had Jonah in position. They had Jogamo ready to execute. And KC are still playing catch up. And it's G2 that have caught up to them. We're 5-5 now.
Yeah, that's a huge bounce back from G2. The eco's still fine, at least in this round for KC, but having used the run it back and not finding the success that they were hoping for onto A, it does put some pressure to try to get something going, and they already create a first blood early enough for Elite to find a body for the neural theft. And that should lead to them making a commitment here in terms of, we know where everyone is, where do we want to take our numbers? The snake bite providing some vacancy for Shaq to work with, trying to spam through the dark cover, but firewall goes up and KC move their way into B.
And Shaq could be just pushing past this smoke and has a duel against Elite, which can open up market and weaken things even further for KC. That's a big win for Shaq. And now KC have to pay attention, but at least playing from B main, they have some space to fall back and play in safer positions. This Viper wall from Shaq, though, is going to be a problem. If he brings that up, it'll force KC to play within the site, but they're just looking at the front door, and Giacomo with the showstopper off in the corner. An easy splash, he gets 2, but KC still have Martin and Zadak.
Backside of the site, Martin's been very safe. He has an idea where Shaq is. Little wiggle, little wag. Killing time right now, though, is KC. All down to Sadhak. 8 HP, but does have both shock darts, hearing all the footsteps. Does he find the ability to line them all up? There's the first, there's the second. No one expects him to be lurking on the site. It's a 1v2 clutch, and KC retake the edge.
Yeah, the post plants for KC are getting better and better, although it is coming down to the wire of Sadak just getting behind the backs of G2, but being able to extend out of the site and doing that before you even get the spike down, just having safer positions. I was a little worried about KC when they lost market control, but I'm seeing Shaq just play with a lot of confidence despite kind of coming in as filling big shoes.
Well, I think the thing about that take for KC is, again, with the neural theft being earned so early, you're not setting up your post plant for market. You know that the defense of G2 has to rotate, and you don't want to put yourself in a position to take that contact at market. You want to set yourself up through B main. But now we want to get into the conversation here, which is Martin on the hunt. Trent just absolutely ran down for first blood. But look at the position for G2, playing really aggressive through mid. So that means that KC cannot necessarily follow up on that first blood. But with G2 losing their defender on B, this is one of those moments where will the element of surprise be enough for them to get back into the site?
I've been finally waiting to see kind of some solo plays out of KC, playing that double duelist, and Martin just pulling 3 players of G2 towards the right side, allowing KC to have a sense of safety. They extend through the top side. Now they only have to worry through main, and that's KC just kind of dotting the I's, crossing the T's.
This is a difficult post-plant setup right now, though, for KC. They do get a really solid reveal through B main, and that makes life extremely easy. Let's say for a moment you might get trapped with Giacomo trying to pinch back through the defensive spawn, but now he's by himself. Giacomo able to find the first, but nothing more behind that. A 7-5 hack for KC, doing what they need to keep an edge early.
But now playing this double duelist, maybe you wanted to squeeze out a few more rounds out of the double duelist, but I think that timeout from G2 right in the middle of that momentum, that 4-round streak out of KC kind of really killed the energy. And then G2 slowed it right down, KC as well. So you wish you got more out of a 7-5, but we'll see how these duelists can kind of maybe separate away from the flock and enable themselves, whether it's the curveball with the Phoenix, which is great solo, or even Martin with the dimensional drift, who went from one side of the world to the other. I'm liking the ideas out of KC.
I think the interesting thing here is going to be, again, what pace does G2 want to play with, knowing that trap plays are likely going to be the biggest early indication of KC keeping the foot on the pedal here, trying to play with that aggression. The other side of this, too, though, is like, as much as KC showed us that on the offensive side they can execute really at any point in the round, they could essentially use those same tools and default to playing for retake in their own right. You know, using the firewall to break off parts of A or parts of B, wherever a spike gets planted, and then you flash around those close corners, you get the Yoru a little bit deeper, and you just kind of play through the smokes, through the walls. That's definitely, you know, one of those situations of pick your poison if you're KC. I think that's kind of, what are we going to get? You know, if G2's going to play him fast, KC will need to probably match that tempo. But if G2 with a Chamber and a Viper try to feel things out, like KC could just hold back, avoid giving a first blood, and just playing for retake.
Yeah, I think Shaq did a good job of anchoring and really just balancing how aggressive he wanted to be and kind of swing out. Very confident he could get those one-on-one trades, and even going for market, not sitting back and waiting for G2 to rotate with him. But we'll see how G2 now can activate with a raise setup with Giacomo. Well, okay, bye, Jonah B.
It's another one of those things, though. Like, this is what G2 are defaulting towards. When you play a Chamber like this, you're looking for first blood success. And not to say that it hasn't been there, but it hasn't been as significant as you would hope for if you're G2. So now you're just playing off this 4v5 post plant. There's the flash to give you the indication of that retake. Paranoia to counter. And KC will have to kind of set themselves up and likely use Martin as an entry point behind this Sova drone.
Just G2 very happy to get those flashes out of the way and maybe even baiting that out, playing as close to the corner as they could to fall back when needed. Now G2 were aggressive, but Wayne leaped with a big double kill coming through market with the rest. Sugetsu 2 places the smoke, gets the defuse, and you've got kind of a crossfire from G2 to try and prevent this, but the firing squad from KC is too strong, and they get the pistol.
And that's just another one that you use the numbers to your advantage. You know you're likely going to be giving something away by forcing so much action through mid off the get-go. You say, okay, we got a 5v4, let's just play post-plant retake. You don't allow G2 to do anything too crazy. You don't let them get in towards the backside of B. You flash them out, you reset, you split the retake by sending a couple of players through market. And it just forces G2 to have to hold on pistols, which is never going to feel comfortable, especially considering that, again, they don't really have any way to counter-initiate here. This is a Jonah P, Shaq essentially playing double Sentinel, and you really don't have the ability without Trent's utility to do anything else to create deterrence or distraction. So good read from KC early, and J2 is in some problem spots here. They're going to go to the Stinger Force up.
Just Casey being able to punish these lurks from Jonah P, getting that critical damage before he's able to teleport out has been huge. Now G2 just going to have double Prowlers. They had one to get through B main, one that's not as deep towards the back, but you got also Martine assisting with Elite. And, well, the Marshall's not going to be as cute close range like that. Big stinger buy from G2. They're known for those forces in the anti-eco or going up against it. And they just try to run it down against KC, who were just ready for this level of aggression. G2 did exactly that in the previous round.
Yeah, love that in terms of a design for an execute for G2. You drop a deep Viper's wall, you throw in the paranoia later than you would expect because you're getting information from Trent. You throw out the Haunt, you throw out the Seize, you throw out a Prowler, whatever you need to try to clear that early space, and then you just snowball with the Stingers. Sadak fighting back, though. Spike has not been planted. 2v2. And Jonah's just playing with a Headhunter in classic combination, but he does connect over towards market, leaving Sugetsu by himself in the 1v2.
Such good awareness from KC to hear that spike get picked up. Once that Viper wall was up from Shaq, he thought he just had a second to get around to safety, but still get the plant off. 1v1, Sugetsu versus Valid, and it's G2 that get the round.
Huge stuff for G2 to recover. I mean, it's one of those, like, it's not a do or die situation, not the Stinger Force purchase, but getting that back in the mix puts this map right back into your grip. Changes the eco pretty darn considerably and puts KC in a little bit of a weird spot here on their next defense, caught off guard by the Stinger repurchase. And again, I think that opening wall that we're seeing from G2, especially considering what just happened in that last round, the isolation makes that B defense feel a little bit more uneasy in terms of what ground you have to stand on. And you see it, the wall goes to one direction, the Haunt keeps you into place on another, and you just flood through it. So that's something that KC will have to keep in mind. It looks like they're going to deal with that by just having Elite playing a different corner. First blood perhaps, but responded by Trent. Do they recognize that Martine is here? Oh, they're going to confirm it with the Prowler. It just comes down to, will they actually commit? No, they don't need to because he will gate crash back to safety.
It's like the second time now this half that KC have early peaked at mid and have found punish on G2, just ego swinging into them, and it's not working out. KC are deadly with those pistols. They already had a thrifty against G2's anti-eco in the first half, so still, G2 have recollected the spike and now have starting to lean towards A once that smoke goes down.
Tough battle there, though, for Jonah. Now has KC collecting a rifle and with numbers could, again, just back off and play for retake in the 4v2. Recon bolt deleted, but at least reveals onto one. And for Shaq and Jogamo, this is tough because you want to try to clear space out, but you also want to give yourself some sort of a Alamo to stand on. And as Shaq will fall, it just comes down to Jaw. Trying to get it done with the Guardian, and yeah, just shoulders playing with them as everyone else is starting to make their way over. But hold on a second, they're not actually putting themselves in a position to play for trades, but no exit for Jogamo. And KC will take the round.
It's not the first time Jogamo has been caught between a rock and a hard place, trying to push that angle and then have that that lurk from Elite find his way behind. So I'm liking what KC are putting out, especially when G2 were starting to knock on the door in that second half. So now that we're going to have some more guns coming in, we may just have a more even playing field. But then you got the run it back. You have the neural theft. KC can really simplify things, just running it down, having Martine with the clone, and that's been their way to just get the ball rolling early. And a lot of the action in these rounds is starting within the first 5 seconds of peaking at mid, and that's been a KC first blood a few times now from that.
Yeah. So timeout coming through. An important round here for both of these two teams. In particular for KC, you use this timeout to talk about what exactly is their protocol for the run it back. Do we want to use it early, gain some early real estate, and really force G2 to have to expend this utility out of Trent, which is really their only initiation they have? Or do you want to give away some space, see if Trent will still use some of that utility early, and then use the run it back as a way to get some ground control on a retake? You know, do you kind of just keep Elite in the corner over towards B? Do you try to play a little bit more of a passive setup around A? Those are the questions here, and it just comes down to what have they drafted up? Because again, if you're joining us here late, neither of these two teams have any competitive experience on this map in official form this year. So this is still a fresh look for both these two squads.
And this is a best of one, and KC are 3 rounds away, and I don't even know whether you want to call this an upset or not. Some people are very G2 pilled and thinking the 4v5, or at least playing with the coach, would weaken them, but still pull out wins against teams like KC. But KC upset Team Liquid in that qualifier, and they have been only improving and only growing from there. So G2 will just take their time at B main to just see how aggressive KC are going to set up their lurks and what they have planned. Where are those trips?
Yeah. Elite able to deal with the first Prowler. That's big. He's got both traps in front of him. He's going to collect one and then replace it off of the tight corner to Market. Jonah's going to put some pressure over towards mid. Aldrone will not see him.
Ooh.
Hold on a second. G2 have maybe a window here where Jonah can calm, saying, wait a second, guys, I can sneak into mid.
You gotta expect this though if you're KC. Like, Jonah has been first blooded here a couple of times, but okay, it's tough with just the pistol, and you don't look both ways. You don't have a smoke on one side, and Jonah's trying to go for the big plays, and KC are not letting him get away with it.
No, it is one of those things though. They make the right read, do G2. The Aldrin doesn't see it. That's the protocol for KC to clear mid. But again, in terms of trusting Jonah to get first bloods, he's not really provided. And that's been one of the conversation points about what are we going to expect out of this G2 squad, missing Leaf, who was one of their biggest ACS leaders at Masters. Who steps up? I mean, for Jonah, you're looking at a player that had a 0.9 KD at Masters, middle of the pack ACS, and you're trusting him to find first bloods all of a sudden, where his first kill percentage was only at like 4% at Masters. So not good is what you're looking at. So that's one of those situations that G2's changing their identity a little bit in terms of what they're putting together, not having Leaf in the picture, and it's costing them right now down big.
Ooh, just satcheling in, no paranoia from Valen, and G2 not being able to trade. That was an issue they had even at Masters, but hey, there's the trade. KC kind of overstaying their welcome and not playing around the box close enough to go back to safety. Not maybe thinking G2 where everyone is going to be around that corner.
Yeah.
So run it back does expire.
But the space is what you're looking for, because it's not just the pressure at A. You've also got Elite on a comfortable route through B main, looking to trap things up over at Tiles. And this will be a backstab of the ages, where Elite's going to be just foaming at the mouth. If he catches the timing, hold on a second, he misses the timing here.
Bit of a ring around the rosy from Elite, and he's been working on those lurks round after round. Not so much in the first quarter of this game, but really activating and punishing people like Jogamo, which great first blood yet again for KC off of that.
Trent gets caught. Yeah, Sugetsu just walks forward. The more space that Elite was able to take, the more that KC realized this was going to be a B hit. And clearing out Market
30 seconds left.
now has Shaq. Would have to be a 1v4. Sugetsu, first one, dealt with cleanly. Go with 20 seconds on the clock and no spike. You're looking just to get out of here and save this weapon, staring down the barrel of a 6-11 in favor of KC, which, again, is just, I think, got everyone a little bit jaw-dropped at the moment.
10 seconds left.
Yeah, just KC are really working the map well. Elite, kind of a newer player, kind of going under the wing of more veterans on the team. Being able to activate that lurk is giving KC a lot more options, is forcing G2 to pay attention to what's behind them. And ever since that KC timeout, they've had a flawless. They've won this round. They're 2 away from winning this best of 1.
Yeah, and that's an important gun round right there that G2 don't really get much going with. So now you're in another economical situation that is going to require you to kind of finesse and play off of, do you force buy now? Or do you try to win this on 6 in a row to an OT? That's really what your conversation is in this timeout. So not ideal for G2. And I think it kind of, I won't say it starts and then ends with this conversation point, but it definitely starts with the fact that this whole game plan for G2 has been, let's resolve off of getting Jonah P on this chamber for early first bloods. And in the pistol with the Headhunter, it looked like, whoa, okay, it's going to work. But the tour de force has been a non-factor. The operator in his hands has been a non-factor. And it hasn't even been like KC overwhelming him with both the double duelists. they're just stretching the map and forcing G2 to worry about a lot of things at once, and they don't have the utility to re-clear space with only having a fade in the picture. So KC have got a good idea of what they want to do. Just avoid the first blood battle, or at least put it on your own terms, and then just make sure we're stressing this G2 now offense from really where they lack, which is on the initiating utility.
And you would say that Trent is like another top 5 player in the world. I mean, pick somebody from G2 and you could have a whole essay around them. So you expected him to maybe take on a little more extra weight in terms of the firepower from G2, and he's kind of having a quieter game one. It is just their first match though, but if you lose this, you go to your last life in groups, and no one wants to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking at stage 1 in Masters, Trent averages a 1.26 KD. He's 5 and 13. He also has an average 80% cast percentage, and he's just not been a factor. Some of it, again, just off of the fact that they're playing odd number situations over and over again. Even right here, they use the Nightfall to try to get into the site, but they don't expect the cyber trap to come in. Hunter's Fury to follow is going to find success, and KC could do no wrong.
G2 got nothing out of the Showstopper and the Nightfall. They kind of sectioned the site, and Elite just chose the perfect time to come in and get that headshot on the G2. We're just going to trail behind even more. What a showing out of KC, and that's going to be almost all she wrote, 12-6. I don't think anyone expected a scoreline like this.
No, not at all. And on a map that, again, you're looking at a best of one, so G2 have a pretty good idea in terms of what map we're going to get. You're trying to set up your coach who's filling in to play an agent that they're going to feel comfortable with. You get him onto a map that he has been playing well on, but it's just, again, your one initiator in Trent is just not providing the space because it's always an odd man number situation. And even right there, it's just not clearing and, you know, crossing our T's and dotting our I's. We're getting trapped up by Cypher, who is essentially solo holding B.
I think it's everything rides on what I was going to say Jonah P could do in mid. He's been trying to get those first bloods, but it's gone usually KC's way. And Jogamo, Val, and 2 huge stars from G2 have been dimmed. The spike is down. G2 have to play against it and against a curveball, which this is not something you scrim against every day. And now you're getting zoned off by Molly, so you can't even play off the C's. Yep. So that's tough.
I mean, look at the setup. Elite, again, knows that no one's playing inside of B, so I'm just going to step up. It allows Sugetsu to know he just has to worry about the mid flank. And you can continue to just reset this one-way smoke on the corner where you know where the spike is down. So everything is sitting up nicely here for KC. Jonah needs to hit a shot. I mean, flat out. He needs to connect here. Viper's put to put some pressure, but again, good call here. KC going to drop the firewall, push in, and you got the long flank on the way. Shaq's in trouble. You need to get some help from Jonah right now, and there it is.
And the more time it takes from G2, the more that Elite can just start to creep his way behind, and if Shaq decides to play out of his pit, he's going to be cooked, and Elite can safely just hunt for this Viper's pit and really ruin G2's chances of coming back into this game. But it is only 3 versus 2 for KC, and Elite is trying to seal the deal and put the nail in the coffin, and that's all she wrote. KC win the best of one.
Unreal start for KC. And again, I know it comes on the backside of G2 playing with a vulnerable roster, not having Leaf in the picture. It's just nothing was going right for G2. Not a single thing based on their playbook design was working out for them. Some of it maybe you can look at and say, okay, if we're setting up to play this chamber and we're playing for first bloods, they didn't happen. So it's like, how do you mold that composition into something else that is playing a deeper round? You know, playing with 20 seconds remaining where you only have a fade. Like, it's just, it's so much pressure onto Trent